The jungle was alive with sounds, the rustling of oversized leaves, the distant calls of alien creatures, and the faint hum of life thrumming through the dense air. Lieutenant Caleb Marks adjusted his equipment, sweat trickling down his forehead as he scanned the lush environment. This wasn't Earth. It wasn't even a planet remotely close to the comfort of home. This was Rhyxis 4, an untamed world filled with mysteries and dangers that defied human comprehension. The mission was straightforward enough: extract valuable resources and establish a small outpost for further exploration. But as any seasoned officer would know, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. Caleb's team had landed 3 days ago. Now, he was the only one left. Something, or someone, had been hunting them. He gripped his rifle tightly, its comforting weight a reminder of humanity's ingenuity. If the jungle was alive, so was he, and he intended to stay that way. As he moved through the underbrush, careful not to make too much noise, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sensation had been there since the first night, an almost physical presence lurking just out of sight. His instincts were proven right when he found the tracks. Large, clawed feet, definitely not human. Whatever left them was bipedal, heavy, and far too close for comfort. He crouched to examine them, his heart pounding like a war drum. The tracks were fresh. "You're not alone out here," he muttered to himself. A sudden crack of a branch made him whirl around, rifle at the ready. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, deliberately, a figure stepped into view. Caleb's jaw tightened as his eyes took in the sight before him. She was tall, her skin a vibrant shade of blue that shimmered faintly under the filtered sunlight. Her features were sharp and alien, yet undeniably captivating. She wore minimal clothing made of woven plant fibers, and her piercing yellow eyes locked onto his with a mixture of curiosity and caution. In one hand, she held a spear, primitive but lethal. Her other hand was raised in a gesture that seemed to say, "Stay where you are." Caleb didn't lower his weapon. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. The alien woman tilted her head, as if trying to make sense of his words. Then she spoke, her voice melodic but unfamiliar. The language was nothing like any Caleb had heard before, but the intent was clear: she wasn't here to attack him, at least not yet. Caleb took a slow step backward, keeping his rifle trained on her. "I don't understand you," he said, his tone softening just a fraction. "But I'm not looking for a fight." She took a step forward, mirroring his cautious movements. The tension in the air was palpable, each of them measuring the other. Then, without warning, she crouched low to the ground and let out a series of clicks and whistles. Caleb froze, his mind racing. Was she calling for backup? Communicating with others? The answer came in the form of movement all around him. Shadows flitted through the trees, and Caleb's heart sank. He was surrounded. A dozen more figures emerged from the foliage, each one armed and watching him with unblinking eyes. It was clear they had been tracking him for some time, and now they had him cornered. "Okay," Caleb muttered, raising his free hand in a gesture of surrender. "Let's talk about this." The blue-skinned woman, clearly the leader, approached him cautiously. Her companions stayed back, their weapons at the ready. She gestured for him to lower his rifle, and after a tense moment, Caleb complied. There was no point in fighting when the odds were so heavily stacked against him. To his surprise, she reached out and touched the barrel of his weapon, studying it with a mixture of fascination and wariness. Then she looked back at him, her expression unreadable. Slowly, she turned and motioned for him to follow. Caleb hesitated. Going with them could mean walking straight into a trap. But staying here, alone and vulnerable, was just as dangerous. With a resigned sigh, he slung his rifle over his shoulder and followed her deeper into the jungle. The trek was grueling. The alien woman led the way, her movements fluid and deliberate, while her companions flanked Caleb to ensure he didn't try to escape. As they moved, he couldn't help but notice the strange connection these beings seemed to have with their environment. The jungle seemed to respond to their presence, plants shifting subtly to make way for them, as if recognizing them as part of the ecosystem. Hours passed before they arrived at their destination, a sprawling village hidden within the jungle. It was unlike anything Caleb had ever seen. Structures made of organic materials blended seamlessly with the natural landscape, and bioluminescent lights cast an otherworldly glow over the settlement. The air was filled with the hum of activity as other blue-skinned beings went about their lives, seemingly unbothered by his arrival. Caleb's guide led him to the largest structure in the village, a domed building covered in intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with a faint light. Inside, the air was cooler, and the space was filled with strange artifacts and symbols that hinted at a complex culture. The woman turned to him, her yellow eyes studying him intently. Then she spoke again, this time slower, as if trying to bridge the gap between their languages. Caleb could only shake his head in frustration. "I don't understand you," he said again, his voice tinged with irritation. "But I'm guessing you brought me here for a reason." She stepped closer, her expression softening. Slowly, she reached out and touched the device on his wrist, his translator. Caleb tensed but didn't stop her as she examined it curiously. Then, with surprising deftness, she activated the device. "Can you understand me now?" Her voice came through, filtered and mechanical but clear. Caleb's eyes widened. Yeah, I can." She nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Good. Then we can talk." He blinked, momentarily stunned by the sudden shift in their interaction. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice filled with equal parts suspicion and curiosity. "My name is Liara," she said. "And you, human, are very far from home." "No kidding," Caleb replied, his guard still up. "What do you want with me?" Liara's expression grew serious. "We've been watching your kind. Studying you. We've seen what you do to worlds like ours." "Hold on," Caleb interrupted, raising his hands defensively. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. My team was just exploring." Her eyes narrowed. "Your team killed one of our scouts." Caleb's stomach dropped. He hadn't been aware of such an incident, but it explained the hostility he'd encountered. "I didn't know," he said carefully. "But if it happened, I'm sorry. That wasn't our intention." Liara studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Finally, she spoke. "Intentions mean little. Actions speak louder." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. So what happens now?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned and gestured for him to follow her deeper into the structure. Reluctantly, Caleb obeyed. Whatever fate awaited him, he was determined to face it head-on. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test not just his survival skills but the very essence of what it meant to be human. Caleb followed Liara down a dimly lit corridor, the walls of the structure pulsing faintly with a strange, organic light. He could feel the weight of every step, his senses on high alert as he tried to anticipate what lay ahead. The alien village had been unsettling enough, but now, inside this structure that seemed almost alive, the tension was unbearable. Yet, curiosity kept him moving forward. Liara led him into a vast chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, disappearing into shadows, while the walls were lined with glowing symbols that shifted and morphed as if responding to their presence. At the center of the room stood a large, circular platform made of what appeared to be interwoven roots and vines. It pulsed faintly, the glow matching the rhythm of Caleb's heartbeat, or was it the other way around? "Step forward," Liara said, her voice calm but firm. Caleb hesitated. "What is this?" "A way to understand," she replied. "For both of us." He looked at her, searching her expression for any hint of deception. There was none, only a resolute determination that mirrored his own. With a deep breath, he stepped onto the platform. The moment his boots touched the surface, the vines shifted, coiling gently around his feet and sending a warm sensation up his legs. He tensed, but Liara raised a hand to calm him. "It won't harm you," she said. "Just relax." The room seemed to darken as the symbols on the walls grew brighter, casting an ethereal glow. Caleb felt a strange pull in his mind, like a thread being gently tugged. Memories surfaced, his training, his team, the mission briefing, flashes of his life playing out in rapid succession. He gritted his teeth, trying to push back against the intrusion, but it was no use. The platform wasn't just reading him, it was unraveling him. Suddenly, the pull stopped. Caleb opened his eyes to find Liara standing before him, her expression unreadable. "What was that?" he demanded, his voice shaky. "A glimpse," she said. "Your thoughts, your memories, they speak of your kind. Of what you've done, and what you're capable of." Caleb frowned. "That works both ways, doesn't it? You saw me. Now I see you." Lyara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Perhaps. But understanding is not so simple. Come." She gestured for him to step down, and as he did, the platform released him with a soft sigh. The warm sensation faded, leaving him feeling strangely lighter. Lyara led him to a side of the chamber where a massive, translucent wall revealed a view of the jungle beyond. But it wasn't just the jungle he saw. Beyond the treetops, Caleb spotted something vast and ancient. A structure, or perhaps a vessel, that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Its surface shimmered with the same bioluminescent patterns as the village, but it exuded a sense of immense power and purpose. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. "What is that?" he asked. "The Heart of Rhyxis," Lyara replied, her voice reverent. "It's more than a ship, more than a relic. It's the lifeblood of our people. And it's dying." Caleb turned to her, confusion and concern etched on his face. "Dying? How?" She hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Your kind isn't the first to come here," she said finally. "Others have come before you. They took what they wanted, left scars on our world. The heart has been weakening ever since. And now, with your team," she trailed off, her gaze hardening. Caleb raised his hands defensively. "Look, I'm not here to hurt your people or your heart. My team was just following orders. We didn't know." "Ignorance is no excuse," Lyara said sharply. "But perhaps you can atone." He blinked. "Atone? How?" Lyara stepped closer, her yellow eyes locking onto his. "There's a way to restore the heart, to heal the damage that's been done. But it requires something only your kind possesses." Caleb frowned. "And what's that?" She hesitated again before answering. "Your will. Your determination. The heart feeds on connection, on the strength of those who bind themselves to it. Your people have a unique resilience, a fire that burns even in the darkest times. That fire could save us." He stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You're saying this thing needs me? That I can somehow fix it?" Lyara nodded. "But it's not without risk. The connection is dangerous. Few survive it." Caleb exhaled slowly, his mind racing. This was beyond anything he had signed up for. Yet, as he looked at the massive structure beyond the jungle, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than him, bigger than his mission. "And if I refuse?" he asked. Lyara's expression darkened. "Then the heart will die. And so will my people. But more will come, Caleb. Your kind always comes back. And when they do, they won't find a thriving world to exploit. They'll find a graveyard." The weight of her words hung in the air. Caleb felt the familiar pull of duty, of responsibility. He hadn't asked for this, but he couldn't walk away from it either. Not when the stakes were this high. "All right," he said finally, his voice firm. "I'll do it. Tell me what I need to do." Lyara's gaze softened, a flicker of hope crossing her face. "Thank you, Caleb. You may be the key to saving us all." As she led him out of the chamber, the weight of his decision settled heavily on his shoulders. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain, there was no turning back now. Caleb followed Lyara through the winding paths of the alien village, his mind reeling from everything she had told him. The Heart of Rhyxis, the immense structure towering over the jungle, wasn't just a relic or a ship, it was alive. It was a living entity connected to the people, their culture, their very existence. And it was failing. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on Caleb. He had always been a soldier, trained to follow orders, to protect and defend. But now, he was being asked to save an entire world, a feat that seemed insurmountable. They stopped at the base of the heart, its glowing surface pulsating faintly, like a weak heartbeat. Up close, the structure was even more awe-inspiring. The intricate patterns etched into its surface seemed to shift and dance, forming shapes and symbols that Caleb couldn't begin to understand. Lyara placed a hand on the heart's surface, and the glow intensified, responding to her touch. "Is it sentient?" Caleb asked, his voice hushed. Liara nodded. "In a way. The heart is more than a machine or an organism. It's a nexus of energy, a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. It connects us to each other and to the world. Without it, we are nothing." Caleb swallowed hard. "And you think I can fix it?" "You must," she replied. "Your resilience, your will, it's unlike anything we've seen. The heart needs that fire to reignite." Before Caleb could respond, a deep rumble reverberated through the ground. Liara's expression tightened, and she turned to face the jungle. From the shadows emerged a group of her people, carrying weapons and looking grim. At their center was an older male, his face marked with scars and his posture commanding. "Who is this?" the man demanded, his voice sharp as his yellow eyes locked onto Caleb. Liara stepped forward. "He is our hope, Elder Rhyxis. The human will help restore the heart." Rhyxis's gaze hardened. "A human? After what his kind has done to our world? You would trust him with our survival?" Liara stood her ground. "He is not like the others. I've seen his memories. He can do this." Caleb raised his hands, trying to diffuse the tension. "Look, I didn't come here to cause trouble. If there's a way to help, I'll do it. But I need you to trust me." Rhyxis snorted. "Trust? Trust is earned, human. And you have much to prove." "Then let me prove it," Caleb shot back, surprising even himself with the intensity of his tone. "I'm here. I'm willing. What more do you want?" The elder studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. "Very well. But know this: failure is not an option. If you betray us, there will be no mercy." With that ominous warning, the group moved into the heart, where Caleb was led to a chamber unlike any he had seen before. The walls were alive with flowing energy, and at the center was a pedestal holding a crystalline structure that seemed to pulse in time with the heart's weak glow. "This is the core," Liara explained. "It's the heart's essence, its life force. To restore it, you must connect with it. But the connection is dangerous. It will test you, push you to your limits. If you are not strong enough, it will consume you." Caleb's stomach churned, but he nodded. "What do I have to do?" Liara gestured to the pedestal. "Place your hands on the core and let it in. It will guide you." He approached the pedestal, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment that could determine the fate of an entire world. Taking a deep breath, he placed his hands on the core. The effect was immediate. A surge of energy shot through him, searing and electric, as the core's light enveloped him. His mind was flooded with images and sensations, memories of the Rhyxians, their joys and struggles, their connection to the heart. He saw the damage inflicted by past invaders, the scars left on their world. And he felt their pain, their desperation. But amidst the chaos, Caleb also felt something else, a spark, a glimmer of hope. The heart was reaching out to him, responding to his presence. It wanted to heal, to be whole again. All it needed was a push, a spark to reignite its flame. "Focus, Caleb," Liara's voice echoed in his mind. "You must channel your strength, your will. Show the heart who you are." Caleb gritted his teeth, summoning every ounce of determination he had. He thought of his team, his mission, the sacrifices he had made. He thought of Earth, of the resilience of humanity, of their ability to adapt and overcome. And he poured all of it into the connection. The core's light flared brighter, filling the chamber with a blinding radiance. Caleb felt as if he were being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time, every fiber of his being stretched to its limit. But he held on, refusing to let go. Then, as suddenly as it began, the energy subsided. Caleb collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The chamber was silent, the air heavy with anticipation. Slowly, he looked up at the core. It was glowing, brilliant and vibrant, its light pulsing with renewed life. The patterns on the walls shifted and danced, a symphony of color and energy. The heart was alive again. Liara knelt beside him, her expression a mix of relief and awe. "You did it," she said softly. "The heart is restored." Caleb managed a weak smile. "Glad I could help." But the moment of triumph was short-lived. The The ground shook violently, and a deafening roar echoed through the jungle. Liara's expression turned to one of fear. "They're here," she whispered. "Who?" Caleb asked, forcing himself to his feet. "The ones who came before," she said, her voice trembling. "The ones who nearly destroyed us. They've returned." As the roar grew louder, Caleb realized the fight was far from over. The heart might be restored, but a new battle was about to begin. The ground shook beneath Caleb's feet as he steadied himself, adrenaline surging through his veins. The roar that had echoed moments before was now accompanied by the sound of heavy machinery and the distant hum of alien engines. Liara stood beside him, her expression grim yet determined. "They're here," she repeated, her voice steady now. "The invaders who first scarred our world. They've come to finish what they started." Caleb looked toward the horizon, where the dense jungle began to tremble under the approach of the enemy. His mind raced. The heart had been restored, but it was still vulnerable. He had to act, and fast. "What do we do?" Caleb asked, turning to Liara. She placed a hand on the heart's glowing surface, her yellow eyes meeting his. "The heart is strong again, but it needs time to stabilize. If the invaders destroy it now, everything we've done will be for nothing." Caleb clenched his fists, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Then we hold them off. Buy the heart the time it needs." Liara nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Spoken like a true warrior. Come, there's something you need to see." She led him to another chamber within the heart, where rows of alien weaponry and armor were stored. The Rhyxians were a peaceful people, but they had prepared for this moment, knowing the invaders might one day return. Caleb donned a sleek, bioluminescent suit of armor that seemed to mold to his body, its surface pulsing faintly in sync with his heartbeat. As the Rhyxians rallied, Caleb took his place at the front lines. The invaders emerged from the jungle, their massive war machines cutting through the foliage with brutal efficiency. They were heavily armed, their technology advanced and deadly. But Caleb wasn't afraid. He had faced impossible odds before, and he wasn't about to back down now. The battle that followed was fierce and chaotic. Caleb fought alongside the Rhyxians, their combined strength and determination a testament to the power of unity. The invaders were relentless, their weapons devastating, but the heart's energy infused the Rhyxians with renewed vigor. Caleb found himself moving with a precision and strength he hadn't known he possessed, the armor amplifying his every action. Despite their efforts, the invaders began to push forward, their numbers overwhelming. Caleb realized they needed a decisive move, a way to turn the tide. That's when Liara appeared beside him, her eyes blazing with resolve. "The heart can help us," she said. "Its energy can be channeled into a weapon, but it will take everything we have to make it work." Caleb nodded without hesitation. "Then let's do it." Together, they led a small team back to the heart. Liara began the process of activating its energy, while Caleb and the others defended the structure from the advancing invaders. The ground shook violently as explosions rocked the jungle, but Caleb refused to give in. He fought with everything he had, the faces of his fallen team flashing in his mind. This was for them, for all the lives that had been lost. Finally, Liara's voice rang out. "It's ready." Caleb turned to see the heart glowing brighter than ever before, its light piercing through the chaos. Liara gestured for him to join her, and together they placed their hands on the core. The energy surged through them, overwhelming and all-consuming, as the heart unleashed its power. A wave of light erupted from the heart, spreading across the battlefield. The invaders' machines faltered, their weapons disintegrating under the force of the energy. The Rhyxians watched in awe as the tide turned in their favor. The invaders, now vulnerable, began to retreat, their forces scattering into the jungle. When the dust settled, the battlefield was quiet. The Rhyxians had won, but the cost had been great. Caleb stood beside Liara, both of them exhausted but alive. The heart's glow had dimmed slightly, its energy spent, but it was still intact. "You did it," Liara said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You saved us." Caleb shook his head. "We did it. Together." The Rhyxians gathered around them, their expressions a mix of relief and admiration. Caleb felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, he wasn't just a soldier following orders. He was part of something greater. In the days that followed, the Rhyxians began to rebuild, their bond with the heart stronger than ever. Caleb worked alongside them, learning their ways and sharing his own knowledge. The connection between their species grew, built on mutual respect and understanding. As Caleb prepared to leave Rhyxis 4, Liara stood with him at the edge of the village. "You've given us hope, Caleb. Not just for our survival, but for the future. You've shown us that even in the darkest times, there is light." Caleb smiled, his gaze shifting to the heart in the distance. "You've shown me the same. Humanity has its flaws, but maybe, just maybe, we can learn to be better." With those words, he stepped onto the transport that would take him back to his world. As the jungle disappeared from view, Caleb felt a sense of closure. He had come to Rhyxis 4 as a stranger, but he was leaving as something more. The heart of Rhyxis pulsed softly, its light a beacon of resilience and unity. And though the battle had ended, the lessons learned would echo across the stars, a reminder that strength comes not from power, but from the bonds we share. Moral: in a universe filled with differences, it is unity and mutual understanding that pave the way to survival and progress. Strength lies not in individual might, but in the connections we forge with one another.